Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Oh, it's happy Christmas time! It's so exciting, Stacy Herbert.
Max, you almost look like a central banker there, printing money.
Yes, here's another billion for MF Global. Oh, here's $1 trillion for Jamie Dimon. Oh, here's $30 trillion for Wall Street. Oh, here's David Cameron. He's got paper gonads.
Well, Max, let's look a little bit back on 2011. This has been the year of Obama's wars, the currency wars, and the biggest war of them all, GIABO, the global insurrection against banker occupation. So, you know, a few weeks ago I invited people to send in images of their own GIABO dogs because I had GIABO Harry. Well, I wanted to show you a few of those little gifts to the audience here. This is from the Mad Ape, and that face is a face only a mother can love. It's GIABO George.
Oh, GIABO George. Keeping it real. Ugly.
That's not very nice for Christmas Eve.
Oh, right. No, of course not.
Here's a GIABO dog from Seattle sent to us by Craig. And this is, as you see, he's holding a sign there, Democracy Gone to Dogs.
Bow wow.
And actually, we were sent a GIABO cat. This is from Brat School. As you could see, he's making fun of David Cameron there, pretending to be a submissive.
Not to be confused with that punk group of the 70s, Bow Wow Wow. Oh yeah, David Cameron, the cat, he's a little pussy cat, isn't he? Timid, over there trying to get his way in Europe, and then they throw the cat out the door.
Finally, on GIABO, I want to turn to episode 154, where we first saw GIABO become international. Yes, Max, the raging Greeks have staged the biggest protest yet, and that's seen in this headline, GIABO. Thieves, hustlers, bankers. So GIABO, of course, is the global insurrection against banker occupation. Yes, the episode was actually even called GIABO, Max, and we were talking about the Athens protesters on their signs. They were starting to connect what was happening in St. Thomas Square with what was happening in Tahrir Square and in Benghazi and in Tunisia.
All right. Well, we, on this show, predicted the global insurrection against banker occupation. It had a few manifestations like UK Uncut, Occupy Wall Street, uprisings in Mideast and North Africa. It's all connected to the same thing, the same corrupt banking system that created hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of unsustainable debt that peaked in 2007 and then started to collapse. And now we've got the austerity measures, but the banks don't want to stop getting paid, and now this is the tension.
You know, I mentioned Greece and St. Thomas Square, and while the people are rising up, the bankers are fighting back with more and more and more, ever more austerity measures, and in fact have installed the former Greek central banker who was in charge of taking all those fraudulent Goldman Sachs swaps. Well, he's in charge, unelected official now. But I want to turn to this headline, Max. Greek woes drive up suicide rate to highest in Europe. Statistics released by the Greek Ministry of Health show a 40% rise in those taking their own lives between January and May this year compared to the same period in 2010.
Lloyd Blankfein has blood on his hands. So does John Paulson, the hedge fund manager. They plotted to destroy the Greek economy. These guys are dripping in blood. The whole Wall Street group of bankers have blood-soaked rags that they live and breathe in. And it's the same companies, the same banks doing the same kind of economic terrorism around the world. You know, you've got suicides in Greece, you've got suicides in India. The farmers in India, it's something like 20 every day commit suicide there because of the same companies. Whether it's Goldman Sachs or Monsanto or Walmart, they're all practicing financialization. They've transformed the business of doing business to the business of financialization, which requires the increase in debt to these incredible levels, and people kill themselves. It's all based on their corrupt model.
The article points out that before the financial crisis began to bite 3 years ago, Greece had the lowest suicide rate in Europe at only 2.8 per 100,000 inhabitants. It has now almost doubled that number, the highest on the continent, despite the stigma in a nation where the Orthodox Church refuses funeral rites for those who take their lives.
Congratulations to Steve Forbes and the International Chamber of Commerce, who were there during the riots, carving up the Greek economy and encouraging the suicide rate. Good going, Steve.
And now I want to turn to this tweet, speaking of the sovereign debt and nations defaulting and the crisis it causes. And it's from Daniel Knowles of The Telegraph, and he says, "This is still awesome. The correlation between percentage of men aged 24 to 35 living at home and sovereign debt risk." As you see, the number one is Greece, where the percentage of men in that age group have to live at home. And next you see Portugal and places like Spain and Italy. And there appears to be a correlation. Not that correlation is necessarily causation, but they are correlated, that the CDS spreads on nations that are very high, that they also have a high percentage of young men living at home.
Yeah, maybe they live at home, but they're not breastfeeding from their mother like the bankers on Wall Street are still doing from the government. Remember, it's welfare for the rich in America and workfare for the poor, and they're there suckling on their government's teat all day long in America. Maybe they don't live at home, but it doesn't stop them from, suckling.
But now the number one source of inspiration for this global insurrection against banker occupation, of course, was the bankers and their crimes and the central bankers and their crime wave. But another source of inspiration on the positive side were WikiLeaks and Anonymous, because remember, it was information that WikiLeaks released into the public domain regarding Tunisia and how their dictator Ben Ali was living, and the same for Mubarak in Egypt, that allowed the population to rise up as they themselves were being hit with massive inflation. So I want to turn to this headline, Tango Down. That was one of the phrases of the year for sure. That is Anonymous, of course, and when they've taken down a site, this is just this past week, Max, they've taken down the sites of Egypt, because once again, while they overthrew one dictator, they still have the military operation in there, backed by the U.S., of course, and the fight for freedom still goes on. The global insurrection against banker occupation still goes on.
Well, when we were in Cairo, we met with people in Tahrir Square, and they were still talking about Barack Obama's speech in Cairo not long before our visit to Cairo. And I had to warn people in Tahrir Square, don't take Obama seriously. This always happens. America goes into these countries, whether it's Vietnam or Egypt or Cairo, and makes big promises, and then when the going gets tough, they bolt. And the people who supported them get beaten up in the streets.
Well, you should never trust a banker or the banker apologist, because I'm going to flash back to another headline from earlier this year. WikiLeaks, Gaddafi turned down Madoff. So even despotic leaders, it turns out, can make sound investment decisions. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi turned down a chance to invest with Bernie Madoff and accused Ponzi schemer Alan Stanford, according to new diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks. The WikiLeaks cable was dated January 28th, 2010. But this year, we learned that, in fact, they didn't turn down, however. Gaddafi did welcome in Goldman Sachs, who promptly lost, within 3 or 4 months, 98% of the $1 billion handed to Goldman Sachs.
Look, Gaddafi would still be alive today if he traded in that colonel suit for an Hermes tie. It's that simple. He had a $200 billion sovereign wealth fund. That would have made him buy lunch with Warren Buffett for, $20 million. Have lunch with him at Smith & Wollensky's steakhouse in Manhattan. Sit down with Warren. Tell him you're interested in buying this and buying that. Like the Aliwad, that Saudi guy. He's no different than Gaddafi. He's from an oppressive regime, but he plays the banker. He'll wear a suit when he has to. And he's like, yeah, I'm smoothing it like a financial terrorist.
Max, actually a viewer of this program, sent in this video called Gaddafi Should Have Been a Banker.
Muammar Gaddafi's biggest mistake was not starting a bank. If Gaddafi only taken Libya's $200 billion in sovereign capital, bought a charcoal suit and a vermilion tie.
The vermilion's a nice choice.
I believe I saw an image of you wearing a vermilion bow tie.
Yeah, I had a vermilion bow tie in this show pretty recently. There was such an outrage against it that I haven't worn one since.
Let's turn here to Bill Black, because we've had him on the show, and he's one of the real thinkers behind this global insurrection against banker occupation. He provides the legalese, the legal framework, and he's in this headline, Max. Bill Black, Dante's Divine Comedy, Banksters Edition. He's responding to this quote from Obama where he was interviewed on 60 Minutes.
One of the things that surprised me the most about this poll is that when asked who your policies favor the most, 42% said Wall Street. Only 35% said average Americans. My suspicion is that some of that may have to do with the fact that there's not been any prosecutions, criminal prosecutions of people on Wall Street.
I can tell you just from 40,000 feet that some of the most damaging behavior on Wall Street, in some cases some of the least ethical behavior on Wall Street, wasn't illegal. That's exactly why we had to change the laws.
So he's responding to Obama claiming that there was nothing illegal done on Wall Street. And Bill Black looks at it and he says that it was all based around these liar loans. Only fraudulent home lenders made liars loans. Liar loans were endemically fraudulent. Lenders and their agents put the lies in liars' loans. Appraisal fraud was endemic and led by lenders and their agents. CDOs backed by liar loans were inherently fraudulent. And he goes on and on. So he said it's all fraudulent. It's not under existing law. And Obama is wrong to suggest otherwise.
Well, what is this comment from Obama? I can tell you from 40,000 feet. In other words, he's in Air Force One on his way to Hawaii to play a round of golf, and his mind is on the golf course. He'll say, well, you know, from 40,000 feet, looking down, it doesn't appear like anything's wrong. And by the way, I'm missing my tea time. What do you mean 40,000 feet? How about 6 feet? How about, like, you know, mano a mano with the actual crooks? Get out of the airplane, you freaking loser!
You know, and this is where Bill Black picks up on your theme of the Dante's circles of hell. He comes up with 10. And he says level 10 is septic tank scum. They deserve eternal hell. These banksters deserve a physical hell of infinite torment and duration. He said this circle of hell is reserved for officers that directed control frauds that involved making predatory loans to more than 10,000 homeowners who lost their homes as a result of the frauds. But all the way down at level 4, Max, he places the banksters who cost us our money instead of our homes, Goldman Sachs and friends. And he says they should be sentenced to a generic prison, a life of boredom, and a severe loss of freedom.
I advocate equivalency. If the bankers and the banksters want to go back to the Middle Ages of serfs and lords, they want to get rid of Magna Carta, they want to get rid of habeas corpus. They want to, now under frickin' Obama, he wants to get rid of anything that would stop the government from putting Americans anywhere in the world, including America, in jail for any reason. Like they think he's an idiot, for example. He could put me in jail for this. How about if we bring back punishment from the Middle Ages to go with your moral equivalency of the Middle Ages? That means you get your freaking head chopped off!
Well, Max, for this first half of our Christmas Eve special, I want to end with a comment from rt.com/programs/Keiser-Report. I remember smoking weed at around the age of 14. I remember laughing, looking at a palm tree because it looked like a Bart Simpson frog. Your show has the same effect.
That's Obama. From 40,000 feet and a spleef. Hawaiian centimillion. Put down the bong pipe, dude. Start governing the country. Oh, that's right. Ron Paul's taking over. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report. We'll see you right after the break, so don't go away. More Stacy Herbert on the Keiser Report.
Life in Russia would be so much brighter if you knew more about someone from first impressions. Meetfriends.rt.com.
Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Christmas episode and special of the Keiser Report. I understand that after a leveraged buyout and hostile raid by Cobra Kravers and Roberts, that was white-knighted in defense from Warren Buffett of Santa Claus, the 7 elves, unfortunately, who were working with him had to be sold into prostitution, but Santa was made whole, and Mrs. Claus, unfortunately, has to bake cookies for the rest of her life in a gulag somewhere in the South Pole. Things are still happening in Santa's workshop. Stacy Herbert, did you follow all of that?
Apparently, Santa stopped in at the Keiser Report in the break, Max.
Yeah.
He left this for me. Some silver right here.
Oh, some bling. Let me check it out.
Oh, yeah, that's silver.
Oh, some silver bling.
It's directed to Stacy Herbert. I also got...
That's totally gangsta.
I got this 10-ounce coin of gold.
Oh,
And there's a bag left for you, Max. Let's see what you got.
I hope it's something like
here's Max's bag.
something valuable.
What?
Ah!
What? You got a rubber chicken?
This is what Santa gives me? A rubber chicken? This was one of the Goldman Sachs last clients who walked into the office looking to get their money managed. This is how they walked out of the office. Whoops! That Lloyd Blankfein is thorough. But unfortunately, they stole all the egg-laying capacities for the duration of the life of this chicken that they sold forward in the egg-laying futures market, and they took all that and up some bonus money, so they'll be getting paid.
Hand back that silver here.
Oh, no.
Don't give me back the rubber chicken. Because silver was one of the big stories of this year, too, Max.
Yeah.
The Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver campaign. We had many artwork sent in from that.
Oh, yeah.
But Adweek also covered it. Big, important magazine in the ad and marketing industry. And they said, Silver Bug goes viral with marketing war. Max Keiser has become a fringe media star thanks to the web. It's not about the price of silver. It's not about crashing JP Morgan necessarily. It's crashing the fraud that they represent. In particular, on the silver market, little did the rest of the world know that though Max had the sense that it was the COMEX and the commodities markets where real things are traded, in which you would have the biggest black swan fraud, or in this case, a rubber chicken fraud.
That's right, and what did that turn out to be absolutely correct?
Yeah.
Because the MF Global scandal, it turns out that Morgan's silver short position that we talked about on this show, they instructed MF Global, John Corzine, to make whole contracts to pay off loans that were commodified by silver that are now on the balance sheet of JP Morgan. You know that their silver position went up by the exact amount of the silver that was stolen from MF Global customers. Hello, it's, this is called wealth redistribution. It used to be called communism. Now it's called Wall Street. If they're redistributing wealth, they're taking wealth, they're seizing wealth.
A comment that came in via tweet from Mike Arkey. Looking back on 2011 of Keiser Reports, he said the most memorable moment for him was Max screaming at the top of his lungs for Jamie Dimon and cuffs has been my most memorable moment, hair-raising. Let's turn to a little clip of that.
Why can't someone put them in jail? Arrest them! Jamie Dimon in cuffs!
Now, Max, this was before the MF Global fraud and JP Morgan's role in seizing, we think, the client funds.
So a lot of people say, hey, you know so much about Wall Street. How come you're not on Wall Street making millions? Because I see what's coming. It's not good. I don't want to end up like Jamie Dimon, okay? This is Jamie Dimon after the mob gets through with him.
Well, speaking of Jamie Dimon, here is an image that was a hit this year from the Keiser Report, and this is Jamie Dimon and the Virgin Blythe. This kind of fits in with the theme of a Christmas Eve show.
That's the Wicked Witch, Blythe Masters, who invented or created or spawned from her corrupt loins the credit default swap machinations that allowed for the UK to become the debt capital of the G20. It all goes back to Blythe and her wicked witch ways.
Well, it also goes back to the City of London, and that's been a big theme this year as well, because without the City of London allowing infinite rehypothecation, MF Global would not have collapsed. Without the City of laundering.
The City of laundering. I mean London.
The City of London, but all of the frauds happened through London. So when those riots happened this summer, Max, and all of the media in London was like, wow, this is all spontaneously evil. These rioters are just uniquely evil and have nothing to do with anything else, all of the fraud and plundering happening in the City of London. Here's Max Keiser's response that went viral.
We need to show the world, which has looked on, frankly appalled, that the perpetrators of the violence we've seen on our streets are not in any way representative of our country, nor of our young people.
STFU. You can't have both, David Cameron. You can't allow plundering in the City of London and then outlaw it in the ghetto that you created from the City of London plundering. Here it's blatantly obvious that your own bankers are financially raping your people. Right up there, Cameron, you did nothing because you're in their pocket, because you're a schmuck. Why are you going after these people? The response of the people in the street looting was not spontaneous. It's based on the fact that they've been oppressed and repressed with financial apartheid. Whereas Blythe Masters and the credit default swap, that was spontaneous. It was immaculate conception. It spawned out of her loins after she had a thought about how to defraud people effortlessly using digital manipulation. That was an effortless, spontaneous event. But this looting was you could see it coming a mile away. If you steal money from the impoverished and you give them no recourse, they're going to revolt, you idiot.
Now, the other big bank in the news this year was Goldman Sachs. And first, I want to turn back to this little clip of you on France 24, about 2 or 3 years ago, where you said this about Goldman Sachs.
What is it about Goldman Sachs? How does it manage to turn the figures around like that?
Well, Goldman Sachs are scum. I mean, that's the bottom line. They basically have co-opted the U.S. government. They've co-opted the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve functionality. They've co-opted the Obama administration. Barack Obama, dances to Goldman Sachs' tune, and they are really crooked and abominable in what they've done. You just remember Hank Paulson held Congress hostage, took him in the back room and said, "Give us $700 billion. We're going to crash this market." He's an arsonist. He's an outlaw, and yet he's given praise.
Ex-Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, who was CEO at Goldman Sachs.
Sure, but if you go down the list, they're all Goldman Sachs scum.
At that time, that was considered kind of like conspiracy theory, and even France 24, which is closely allied with Sarkozy, they were like, this is crazy. But I want to turn to a clip just very recent in the last month or two, where France 24 is now saying this about Goldman Sachs.
The European Freemasonry of Goldman Sachs, and what they mean by Freemasonry is the way in which the Freemasons operate is it's a network, and Goldman Sachs essentially, according to the London Correspondent, I mean it's pretty difficult to refute what he says, have put in place a network across Europe. Who does that include? You've got Mario Draghi. Let's have a look at his photo here online. He is he's the new head of the European Central Bank, former vice president of Goldman Sachs Europe. You've also got the current Prime Minister, unelected Prime Minister of Italy, that's Mario Monti. He was a former advisor to Goldman Sachs from, I think, 2005 up until the point when he was made Prime Minister. You've also got the Prime Minister of Greece by the name of Lucas Papademos. And he was a former head of the Greek Central Bank at the time when Greece came into the Eurozone. Now, what they're saying here is the figures that Greece presented, we've been hearing this for a long time now, that the figures were not honest. And in fact, it seems that Goldman Sachs helped Greece to present a better face to the world.
Right, and remember on the BBC, somebody made a similar comment many years after I made that observation, and this was the story of the day. It got over 1 million views on YouTube because the BBC presenters were gobsmacked to find out the truth, that Goldman Sachs runs the world. Only at the BBC could they be so oblivious to what's happening in the real world, in the actual news.
Well, actually, you were on there with a former director or managing director of Goldman Sachs, and he was the only one that agreed with you on the BBC program. Like everybody else was like, this is preposterous, and even the Goldman Sachs guy saying, oh yeah, it's all true. And they were like, that's conspiracy theory. Like nobody, even when confronted with the facts, that proves that we're in a cult-like situation, that they themselves have invested, much of the population has invested so much in this dream that they have been sold, that they can never have to work again and will magically be wealthy for here to eternity.
Yeah, it's like we're going back to the medieval days, and remember the old days, those medieval doctors used to cure people by leeching them. You know, this is like Cameron now. He's trying to cure the UK economy by leeching it of all its financial integrity through austerity measures. He's living in the 17th century, this guy. The 12th century.
And then we have to turn finally to a few little images here, Max, of the Keiser Report audience has been amazing at providing some of the best artwork. First, I want to turn to one that was a big hit. This is GIABOzilla. This is
Yep.
this is Max Keiser tearing down the city of London with the babe Stacy in the background.
That's fantastic.
That's me at 50 feet tall. And then, of course, when you burst the eye blood vessel, you know, when it was really bad. We had the Maxinator.
Excellent, of course. All right, well, that's fantastic. So let me get this straight. To recap, Santa Claus on the North Pole has endured a hostile raid by Colbert, Kravis, and Roberts, and the various reindeer, the dwarfs, and Mrs. Claus have been farmed out to a third world gulag. We have David Cameron, who's proved an imbecile when it comes to economics. Max's exploding eyeball was the most viewed YouTube hit of the entire year. And you got all the good stuff for Christmas, and I got a rubber chicken.
That's right. And before we go, thank you so much for all of your comments and postings. But please do note there's only one Facebook page that is official for Keiser Report, and that's facebook.com/Keiser Report. And for Max Keiser, it's facebook.com/Max Keiser. There's somebody who is perhaps Lloyd Blankfein or Jamie Dimon operating a Max Keiser page pretending to be you.
And who's winning the Twitter wars? That's right. Follow me on Twitter. I've got many more followers than Stacy. Ha, ha, ha. Well, well, well. That's going to do it for the Christmas edition of Keiser Report with Max Keiser and Stacy Herbert. If you want to send us an email, please send it to keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.